everybody. Welcome to a special solo Socratic cinema discussion. My name is James Delisio, and I just got back from seeing Weathering with You, directed by Makoto Shinkai. This is kind of a loosely scripted little solo discussion with just me, similarly to what Charlie did back with Hobbs and Shaw. I got home from seeing this movie, and I got home about 40 minutes ago as of recording this, and I just felt compelled to record something about my ideas because this movie was just so absolutely beautiful, and I'm gonna get into that in a little bit, but I hope you will join me on this little solo discussion as we discuss Weathering with You. Like I said before, this was directed by Makoto Shinkai. I watched it with the original Japanese audio with English subtitles. It was a delightful experience, and I highly recommend that you go see it. I can't speak for the quality of the English dub because I didn't see it, but the Japanese voice work was absolutely amazing. Makoto Shinkai, I know he was made famous in the mainstream audience. I don't think it's going to be too outrageous to say that he was made famous by Your Name, which was released in 2016. I did not see Your Name, but I heard a lot about it, a lot of very good things. And so when I saw ads for Weathering with You all over the internet, I was very excited, and I had high hopes, and it most certainly delivered. I definitely am going to go need to watch Your Name now, just so I can get more of this director. He's absolutely brilliant. I've heard people say he's the next Miyazaki. I don't know if that's I don't know if making comparisons like that is necessarily the way to go about this sort of thing, but you can tell that there is a clear inspiration from Miyazaki, from the supernatural elements of this movie to the Ghibli tears to the general animation style and aesthetic. The aesthetic of this movie reminds me a lot of Ponyo, the Studio Ghibli movie, but I'll get into that in a little bit. If you don't know, a basic little plot rundown of the movie, by the way, I will give extra warnings when I start diving into spoiler territory. I'll save that for the later portion. I figure I'll start with a bit of a spoiler-free review, I guess. A basic plot rundown of this movie, though, is we follow a boy named Hodaka, please pardon me for butchering these names, I don't speak Japanese, who runs away from home to live in Japan, which has been covered in non-stop rain for months, where he meets a girl named Hina, who has the supernatural ability to control the weather by praying. Hina and Hodaka form a quick friendship and use this ability to start a business selling sunshine to people for special events like weddings and flea markets and things like that. Hodaka, meanwhile, is also employed. He's kind of taken in off the streets by this urban legends type of writing firm. They run by this man named Keisuke Suga. They call him K for most of the movie. That's what I'm going to be calling him. He works with his accomplice Natsumi. And that's the basic hook of this plot. I don't want to give away too much. It's because it is a very... It takes a lot of twists and turns. It's a very nice story, though. I will get into that a little later in the spoiler section. As for my spoiler-free review of Weathering with You, I think it's probably best to start with the animation of this movie. It was the main draw for me when it came to seeing this movie. The animation is top-notch from start to finish. There's not a moment of lower quality. It is consistent throughout the movie. I think the highest points of absolutely satisfying animation for me were any scenes involving cooking, as is the case for many Ghibli movies I know. Take, for example, a scene where Hodaka and Hina are in Hina's apartment, and she is cooking this very basic rudimentary meal out of instant ramen and eggs, and potato chips are involved, and it looks so delicious the way it's framed and animated, and it's almost sensationalized. It's very romanticized. What can I say? It's beautiful. I can't describe it with words. It's something you have to see, but I think you can get the idea of what I'm talking about or a scene where I don't know why it's the food scenes that are always the best to me, but there's a scene. It sounds silly to say it. There's a scene where Horako eats a Big Mac, and it looks like the best burger that I've ever seen. It's such a small act of kindness in that movie, and it really pulls on your heartstrings a little bit, because Horako he's kind of homeless at this point in the movie. He's just run away, and someone gives him a Big Mac, and it's just the littlest thing like that. I mean, I don't think many of us choose to eat Big Macs in our normal lives, but just this small act of kindness means the world at this point, and you really feel that as an audience. It just adds to the whole beauty of this movie. It's very charming. It's very quaint. It's pretty in the same way that I described Little Women as pretty. This movie is very pretty. It is beautiful in its character. It is beautiful literally in its animation, as I have already talked about a little bit. It's just a beautiful movie with some beautiful things to say. As for the story itself, it's a pretty standard plot hook for this type of movie. Star-crossed lovers, boy meets girl, with a little supernatural twist, as is common in this genre. It's nonetheless charming. I don't think its rudimentary nature takes away from the quality of the story at all. It actually handles a lot of different narrative tracks at once, despite the simple setup. There's a lot of B plots that it juggles well in an hour, in only an hour and 50 minutes. It's a pretty short movie. Characters are explored and fleshed out. We get thorough backstory on almost all of our characters. Admittedly, I would have liked to see a little bit more of maybe Hodaka's background. Most of the characters are very fleshed out. We know where they come from. We know why they're inspired the way that they are. The movie is very character-driven. It's very character-driven, and it does not fall short. It most certainly delivers on that front. Speaking of how short the movie is, it dragged a little bit for me, specifically in my viewing experience. I don't think it will drag for most, because just because they don't have a ton of time to work with. The reason it dragged for me in the third act a little bit is because I had a very unique experience watching this movie. About 30 minutes in, our projector cut out. There was and all the lights went out. It was a power outage or something. And we kind of just sat there in the dark for a good half an hour. But then the movie came back on, and we finished out the remaining hour and 20 minutes or so that we had left. So I kind of had to put in that effort to get reinvested in the movie once the power came back on. Again, it's hard for me to review this objectively with the experience that I did have. It dragged for me because I felt like I was watching a second movie. I don't think that will be the case at all for anybody else's viewing, though. The third act is something I really want to talk about, but I'm going to wait for the spoiler portion of the video for that. It's a very beautiful plot. It is simple yet effective, and it most certainly will tug at your heartstrings. It will make you feel happy. It will make you feel sad. It will make you wish that you were a 16-year-old living on your own in Japan with the girl you love. It's an emotional journey, honestly. And I know that is thrown around a lot, but this movie is most definitely a journey that takes you through highs and lows, peaks and valleys, whatever you want to call it. And it wraps it up very nicely in a nice way that feels conclusive and satisfying, yet at the same time not a cop-out or a deus ex machina. It's a very grounded ending, which is funny to say for a movie with fanciful elements like controlling the weather and things like that, but the ending is very grounded, which is a little bit refreshing. In these youth-oriented kind of teenage romance movies, it's easy to see an ending where the world is handed to them on a silver platter, but this one doesn't go too far. I think it stays well within its bounds. The voice acting and the music in this movie is spot on. The sound design is incredible, absolutely incredible. The sound, the Foley work and the sound design is crisp and clear. You can tell so much attention to detail was put into the sound of this movie. Everything sounds realistic and clear and dynamic. So much so that you can notice how good it is, like I did. The voice acting, they gave their all. It's very traditional anime style voice acting. It's absolutely full of emotion. If you're not into that thing, if you're not into that kind of thing, see the English dub maybe. I don't know. But huge shout outs to the voice actor and shout out to the soundtrack. It serves the movie perfectly. The soft piano that sounds like it's out of Spirited Away or Breath of the Wild or something. But it does also branch into rock territory in some scenes. No matter what the soundtrack pulls, it always fits and it always serves the mood that they're going for in the movie. And with that, I think that wraps up my spoiler-free review of Weathering with You. And with that, we are officially moving into spoiler territory for the last couple of points I wanted to talk about in this movie. If you do not want this fabulous movie to be spoiled for you, now's the time to stop. I'm going to go ahead in 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome to the spoilers allowed portion of the discussion. I want to talk about the ending of this movie. More specifically, how this movie subverts expectation. I mentioned a little bit ago that it's a realistic ending, and I'm going to elaborate on that in a second. But this movie subverts expectations so many times, and sometimes it's humorous, and sometimes it leaves very interesting implications. There's a lot of moments of subverting expectations that are used for comedic effect or to build on character relationships. Hina's little brother, Nagi, who's like a grade schooler, who's kind of a ladies' man, winds up being this sage almost to Hodaka as he navigates his feelings for the girl. We see this like 7-year-old teaching a 16-year-old how to ask a girl on a date and buy a girl presents and tell her you love her. And it's very funny, but it's an interesting dynamic that works, I think. Nagi, the brother, winds up being one of my favorite characters of the movie. He's just so appealing in this weird, like, reverse roles of age in this movie. Another example of subverting expectations to deepen character relationships, Natsumi, who works at the writing firm, I think it's K&G something is the brand name, who works at the firm with Kei and Hodaka. Hodaka at first assumes her to be Kei's mistress, but it's later revealed that she's actually his niece in a kind of weird turn of events. There's a little bit of a cultural barrier at points in this movie. You know, little things like that are a little strange, but it doesn't really matter too much, honestly. But the biggest thing here that I want to bring up as far as subverting expectations go is how the movie ends. So the main conflict of the movie is that Japan is covered in rain for months on end, and the only time the sun shines is when Hina uses her ability to remove the rain for a period of time. However, throughout the movie, we learn that this takes a toll on her body, and eventually she will completely disappear, or in a nice little nod to Miyazaki, as the movie puts it, be spirited away, up into the sky as a sacrifice, and the weather will return to normal. And Hodaka doesn't learn this until it's too late, and so right before the climax of the movie, Hina actually asks Hodaka, do you want the rain to disappear? And he goes, yeah, like anyone would, not knowing what he's saying. And Hina, who's already well into the process of kind of fading away, but she's been hiding it, but she finally goes all the way, and Hodaka wakes up and she's gone, and the sky is clear, and it's crazy, because normally we associate rain in movies with bad times, depression, sadness, heartbreak, But here, it's the reverse. You see the blue sky, and we as an audience know exactly what's happened, and it hits like a train. It's absolutely crushing to see what's normally a symbol of happiness be used as a symbol for such a devastating event. It's interesting because that has essentially solved the main problem. Hina sacrificed herself, and the rain is gone. And in a lot of movies, it might end there, and it's a bittersweet ending, but it was for the greater good. Or in another type of movie, as I'm gonna move a little further through the climax here, the main climax of the movie is Hodaka racing to this shrine to try and bring Hina back. A more optimistic version of this movie may have ended with Hodaka bringing Hina back and the rain staying gone. Have your cake and eat it too. Everything is solved. Everything is great. Those two options that I talked about were probably what most movies would have done. This movie does neither. In a very interesting turn of events that I honestly didn't see coming and was pleasantly surprised with, Hodaka rejects the greater good entirely, and in an almost selfish way, he is completely honest with his feelings. He knows all he wants is to live with this girl he loves. He doesn't care if it rains. He doesn't care if he never sees another blue sky. He damns Tokyo to eternal rain to bring back Hina. And Tokyo, we get a 3-year time skip in the epilogue, and Tokyo floods like it's serious. Tokyo is going to be sunken underwater and in a matter of years. But Hodaka doesn't care. He got what he wanted. It's this very interesting message the movie has, where you shouldn't sacrifice your own personal happiness in the hopes of saving a growingly difficult world. Yes, we can all do our part to try and save things, but at the end of the day, your happiness is also important. And Hodako is a character who is so honest with his own feelings that he sacrifices the fate of Japan for his own personal wants and for the person he loves. And it's very strange. It's something that I don't see very often at all. It's bittersweet in the opposite way that most movies are. And it's jarring, but in a very, very good way. I loved this ending. Of course, it's not all pessimistic for Tokyo. The movie does, sort of through this older character, we hear her talking about how in the past Tokyo was all underwater anyways. So it's really just coming back to the natural state of things. So it does provide a little bit of reassurance, but it's just still so mind-blowing to me that this movie casts aside the greater good and any sense of nobility. It's very childlike in its the way it handles the climax, because these are children. It's an aspect that you don't see very often in these kind of movies. Yes, the message of these Ghibli-type movies is usually that childlike wonder wins all, but never to the degree that it's worth destroying an entire city. And the movie certainly does not shy away from that fact. It makes it very clear that Tokyo is sinking and it's all Hodaka's fault, but it doesn't paint him in a bad light for it. He just did what he had to do to get his own happiness, much in the same way that all of us make less than morally upright decisions for our own happiness sometimes. It's a very realistic moral that is not often explored, but it's a very effective moral, I think, and one that's becoming increasingly prevalent in the society we face. There's obviously a lot of climate undertones in this movie, but it is definitely not, I would say, an environmentalist movie. In that the ending has the main character sacrifice environmental safety for his own selfish wants. But it does definitely make you think about the state of our own current real life environment and what we would do if given this scenario. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just, I know this is a bit of an anticlimactic final point given what I just talked about. That's definitely the meat of what floored me about this movie, but it was surprisingly intense. I expected this to be more dramatic rather than dealing with any really intense themes, but this movie, it is not afraid to get dark. Hodaka gets very close to shooting people twice. He finds a gun from a crime scene and keeps it on him almost like the Joker. He doesn't shoot anyone. He doesn't shoot anyone. I'm gonna make that clear. It's not like he's a killer, but he is very seriously considering it more than a few times. He's pointing guns at people, finger on the trigger. He winds up firing it in the air, but it's made very clear that this is a real gun and he is really willing to kill to save this girl. It's very star-crossed lovers in general. There's also a weird recurring theme of like human trafficking and like underage like sex clubs. It's very bizarre. Hina is these like sleazy old men are trying to like get Hina to work in their club, and Hodaka barges in and is like, no way, like you can't force her to do that. And then he starts waving his gun around. It serves the story, and it's definitely not poorly handled, but it's just not something I expected at all to be in this movie. I don't know what I'm trying to say with this, but it's not a kid's movie. It handles more adult things like gun violence and human trafficking and underage sex rings, but despite that, it also has a very childlike charm to the majority of it. It just has these moments of super intense emotion, and it all comes from what Hodaka is willing to do to save Hina, and just how far he's willing to go. It's very intense. It's a very visceral experience, those scenes, and that's really the gist of what I wanted to talk about with this movie. Once again, Weathering with You, directed by Makoto Shinkai. I think it's in most theaters. English subtitles or English dub. I can't speak for the quality of the dub, but I highly recommend seeing this movie if you haven't already. It is most definitely a journey, and it is under 2 hours, which is not something you see every day. I pray that your projector doesn't shut down for half an hour when you watch it, so that you can experience it the way it was intended to. Let me just tell you, this movie has a lot of cut to blacks, and once your projector cuts out once, cut to blacks are very hard to trust. Definitely, after our projector cut out, that definitely killed my immersion every single time the movie cut to black. I was thinking, oh man, did the projector cut out again? Or is this one on purpose? Just a wild experience for me that I sincerely hope none of you will have to experience. Please don't let it scare you away from seeing this movie. It's wonderful. And I recommend it with all my heart. If you're looking for something to make you feel good, I think that you have no better choice right now than to go see Weathering with You. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming along with me on this little solo journey. I kind of like this. It's a lot of fun. I want to try and do more things like this in the future. Go check out our if you want more, if you like what I had to say and you want to hear more great people making great points, go check out the rest of our podcasts. We have at least 15 episodes, probably getting pretty close to 20 at this point. Go check it out. We have a decent backlog of episodes for you to run through. We talk about lots of movies on the show. Thank you so much for listening. We're available on all major platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Anchor if you use that, YouTube. Tell your friends if you enjoyed it. Socratic Cinema, it's the place to be in 2020. And I hope to see you listening again in the future. Thank you so much. I guess I have to say adios, because that's what we do. Adios.